President Bola Tinubu has constituted an economic advisory committee to foster collaboration between the federal government, subnationals and the private sector. This initiative emerged from discussions with key stakeholders in the private sector at the State House, Abuja, on Sunday evening. Tinubu emphasizes that the committee's objective is to enhance efforts in stabilizing the economy and securing the best economic future for Nigerians. State House correspondent Adesua Omoran reports.
Nigeria is facing tough economic problems and food crisis, a problem the government has admitted and is struggling to keep in control. Here at the presidential villa, at a tripartite committee meeting, President Bola Tinubu, along with members of the organized private sector and state governments, discussed vital strategies to revive Nigeria's economy.
We are looking for additional efforts that might help the downtrodden Nigerians, and we will provide that hope and the assurance that the economic recovery is on its way. We are not saying that we have all the answers, but we will not be blamed for not to try. We assure Nigerians that we will do our best to get our Marshall Plan in place and fashion out the best economic future for this country.
Captains of the industry, including Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, is in attendance. They emphasize the significance of addressing economic challenges, but more importantly, unity in navigating the turbulent times.
We had a very, very good meeting, and what we discussed is generally about the economy, food security, security of the nation. We discussed everything in detail. And I think there is the economic presidential advisory, which has been set up. And I think this will look at all the issues and address them. Coming from creating job creation, coming from food security, coming from also reflating the economy. So all these things, they've been discussed in detail. I can't give you all the details right now, but we are hopeful and we're a great nation. We have what it takes to turn around the economy, and we're going to do that.
So I think the private sector is looking forward to the implementation of most of the decisions that we have made with the president. Manufacturers are looking forward to an environment that is conducive for business, and so the issues surrounding foreign exchange, insecurity, and general operating environment were discussed. And we received the assurances of Mr. President that very soon we are going to start to see some major changes.
As has just been said, it's a tripartite meeting and designed to, put heads together and to think together. They will have one national economy, and it's the responsibility of the 225 million Nigerians to work together to make it great. And we have all the potentials, and we have all that it takes to make Nigeria, get right through these turbulent times and put the economy back on a sustainable keel. I think there is a unity of purpose, a determination, the sense of patriotism and determination by all to make it happen.
Others express optimism in measures put in place by the handlers of the economy.
It was open, it was frank, and it was exhaustive. And some of the issues we discussed, for example, like the foreign exchange rate, which we know has always been the problem for the past 2 or 3 months. We have discussed on how to, bring the foreign exchange, the rate down, because we all know that what is happening in, as regards the foreign exchange is artificial, it's manipulative, And thank God, the CBN, is doing quite a lot now. The exchange rate has come down from 1.8 to maybe 1.615 now. And as we all know, everything in Nigeria is indexed to the foreign exchange, especially when it comes to, stuff that we import into the country.
I leave this meeting with a lot of enthusiasm excitement and optimism about the future of our country. I believe that implementing the decisions we arrived at today will help propel our economy and help alleviate the poverty in the land, help create employment, and help put food on the table.
Governor Abiodun of Ogun State is assuring the public that the state governments are actively involved in providing immediate relief at the subnational level.
As a governor, I can assure you that all hands are on deck. All governors have resolved to join hands with Mr. President to ensure that you provide the necessary intervention to cushion the effect of what we are going through, whilst we are waiting for the implementation and the evidence of the fiscal and monetary policies that are already in place. So the teeming public should have that confidence that we are not leaving them alone. In my state and in other states, we are bringing in rice, we are bringing in food items, and we are selling at rates that obtained before, the downslide of the naira. So we are going to be doing all those kind of things to bring succor to the common man until when you begin to see the evidence of the fiscal and monetary policies.
The private sector, represented at this meeting, is looking for continued collaboration to address challenges and contribute to Nigeria's economic recovery. Analysts note that acknowledging challenges and seeking collaborative solutions is a crucial first step in addressing Nigeria's complex economic issues. Adesoa Omorwan, Arise News.
All right, Rufai, the road to economic recovery paved with committees and advisory meetings like this. Your take on this story?
Okay. On the surface of this is good. It shows a responsiveness to the problems. Committees like this are good. Remember President Buhari too had committees like this. There's also a role for the Vice President in the Constitution to be able to handle the economy, but Buhari had another side role that had the likes of this same Soludo, and I think Bismarck Rewani was on the list, but didn't have private sector, the likes of Professor Doyin Salami and all of that. But all the advisory, we all saw how that went. I just hope all the advisory these people will give, the president is going to take them in their stride and do well to be able to aid the economy. That's on the surface. It's a good move on the surface, and I commend the president for this. The second part of me will say, why now? So was it that when President Tinubu was coming to power, he didn't even have a plan to start with? Was that the case? Because you should have been able to marshal out what you wanted to do in the first 1 year. You should be able to scenario plan the antecedent response you would have gotten if you were to pull out subsidies, which we have reversed the pain now. And if you were to float the currency, which we have gone back to defend it now, because even with your managed float now, we're going back to defend because we didn't have the dynamics and the fundamentals at first to defend when we floated the currency. Didn't you do adequate scenario planning to be able to look and say, okay, these are going to be the attendant economic challenges when you came in? Another thing a lot of people will say is, why is this coming after about 8 months? And there are many more people that, some people have expected to be there, but I think it was generally representative. The private sector was heavily represented. Man was represented there. Somebody will have wanted to also see those from the farmers, being represented, but you can say the Dangote Group does a lot in the farming sector, so Amboa too does a lot in the farming sector. But largely, this plan, 8 months after, what's going to be the follow-through implementation? This is after we had the first announcement of palliatives in July, which we have not seen the effects. Because for me, the things that will stimulate this economy will be, number one, following through on that presidential initiative of CNG, to be able to have multiple energy sources for the country, not just over-dependence on petrol. Number two, stimulating manufacturing in the economy and in bringing about productivity. Three will be the dealing with the foreign affairs, with the forex crisis that we're having, which the CBN has started, but we need more fundamentals to defend. They said about 10 billion is coming in a couple of weeks from now. So if we do not do that, we cannot accelerate and be able to get to where we want. But on the face of it, this is a good one. Let's see how it pans out.
All right. There's something in English language called putting the cart before the horse.
And it will appear that the Tinubu administration, in terms of policy-making process, put the cart before the horse. It simply means in basic English that when you do the right things in the wrong order, we would have expected that beyond the manifesto, that the Tinubu administration, instead of coming in from day one and screaming, subsidy is gone, whatever controversies around that, I do not want to reopen that the government will have settled in and then engage in this consultative process to carry major stakeholders along. Instead of getting into trouble, which is policy-making process, you don't make policy on an ad hoc basis. It's a whole subject of study. I mean, students of policy would confirm this. There are textbooks on the subject. There are experts on the subject. It's something that you have to study, and you just follow the process. But in this case, we've seen crisis with the policy formulation and policy implementation process. And of course, when you run into trouble, when you fail intellectually, then you, of course, go back to the basics. So that is what I see that the government is doing here. That's number one. Number two, they invited 16 persons, including Maina from the Economic Summit Group, Soludo, Governor of Anambra, former Chief Economic Advisor, former Governor of Central Bank, so he brings the experience there. Bismarck Rewane from the failed Doyin Salami group that advised President Buhari. I say failed economic advisory group advisedly, but again, the advisors will say maybe they didn't take their advice. Maybe those who asked them to come and advise didn't even understand enough economics. And then, of course, you had Aliko Dangote, Femi Otedola, Abdulsamad Rabiu of Bua, you have Aliu, you had Governor Abiodun, you had Governor Soludo, you know, you have the DG of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, and then, of course, you know, Tony Elumelu, you know, of Union Bank for Africa and Hess Holdings. So they met. Okay, good optics. Government runs into trouble. It goes back to the stakeholders to seek advice. And now the major outcome of that meeting is that they have now set up what they call a tripartite advisory committee. It is one thing for the advisory committee to offer advice. It is for government to listen. Number two, it is for the members of the advisory committee to use the opportunity to present the hard truths and not just behave like, oh, you know, we are also there. They have recognized us. What are the opportunities? Because part of the problem with Nigeria is corporate Nigeria. There's a lot of also opportunism in corporate Nigeria. There isn't enough time for me to talk about the opportunism of corporate Nigeria in terms of access to the corridors of power. Number three is that there is in place a National Economic Management Committee chaired by the president himself. Would there be a conflict? There is a National Economic Council chaired by the Vice President of Nigeria. Would there be a conflict? And then number three, convention provides for the position of a Chief Economic Advisor. This Tinubu administration has not yet appointed a Chief Economic Advisor who can interface, you know, among the various persons on the monetary side and the fiscal side, and also offer advice to the president. I think it is about time that this government appointed a Chief Economic Advisor. Buhari had the Chief Economic Advisor, even if it was ineffectual, in my own opinion. Previous governments also had Chief Economic Advisors. There should be somebody whose daily job should be to look at the numbers instead of all this tripartite, which has become a famous phrase there now, where everybody is an emergency economist and driving us into a ditch. I think that these are the major issues, you know, but okay, in terms of optics, everybody was talking up and down because really there is no proper coordination, you know, and that's a problem. And yet, Nigeria is in a ditch. We have to resolve the problem of the Naira that is yo-yoing
all over the place. We have to solve the problem of inflation. We have to solve the problem of foreign exchange crisis. That will require more rigorous thinking than optics.
Absolutely. Now, just to mention, or to quote what the DG of MAN had mentioned, he talked about the importance of implementation. So it's one thing to come together to have a meeting like this, and as already been said, the efforts of the president commendable. What we have called for is that the president ought to be seen to be doing something to respond to the economic situation that he finds himself, or that we find ourselves here in Nigeria. However, all this will be tantamount to talk shop if we do not see implementation, and in the immediate, because we are in a situation that needs immediate response. I think it was Dr. Batida said last week that the ordinary man does not understand GDP figures. The ordinary man doesn't understand tripartite meetings or committees or economic advisory team. What the ordinary Nigerian wants to see is food on their table. That at the end of the day, these meetings and these, allowances that would be paid for sitting, I don't know, I mean, the constitution of the committee is such that they're able to find their way and just do this altruistically. But in the events that all this happens, what the ordinary man wants to see is actual results, actual, action, and the fact that they're able to go and buy fuel at a price that is commensurate to what their earning capacity is, that their wage is enough for them to be able to live and also, look after their family members, that we're able to stem the tide of anger and protests that have erupted across the country. These are the real issues. And so we're hopeful that with this committee, the action will be swift and implementation will be taken on board, will be done as swiftly as possible. The next thing I'd like to address is perhaps when it comes to committees like this, the inclusion and inclusivity of committees like this. We don't often talk about this when we look at committees, but I make bold to criticize this or to analyze this based on the fact that when President Tinubu was coming into power, he had talked about having an inclusive government. It means that at all levels of decision making, it must be part of his strategy and agenda. For instance, at that meeting, I'd have liked to see more representation in terms of gender equity and gender balance. I'm not trying to fight for the women, but what I'm trying to say is because the United Nations already said it that women are disproportionately affected by economic shocks. Therefore, when we have conversations like this, they must be well represented on the table. Another group I would have loved to see on that committee are SMEs, a representation, because where we see there are large conglomerates, big businesses who perhaps might not feel or be able to give that much needed advisory or representation on that committee as we would have from the SMEs who are the most affected by the economic malaise. Of course, we would have loved to see more young people represented. These are voices that can no longer be kept quiet or kept short when it comes to conversations at economic level, when it comes to food security, when it comes to national security, across board. I believe my call this morning is that when we constitute committees like this, we must always be conscious of inclusion and inclusivity so that we have a more robust conversation and at least everyone in Nigeria is represented and we have a fuller and perhaps even richer outcome from such committees. But again, like I mentioned, implementation is key. Let's see how this pans out.